the idea that financial independence is all about some number on your account statement, or even worse, that you don't qualify because of where you started out. That's just not true. It's not about some well-kept secret of the wealthy. It's about finding the right information and knowing how to apply it. On the Get Ready for the Future show, we're answering your questions so you can start making real financial change today. The journey to true financial independence begins right here, and it starts with you.
We are here to help people discover, protect, and share true financial independence. That's why the Get Ready for the Future show exists online, on podcast, on radio, and we thank you again for joining us. My name is Scott Inman, along with John Shrewsbury. We are here to answer your questions. Before we dive in to the Q&A portion of the program, we do want to tell you about a couple of big events that we've got coming up. You know, it's as we record this, on February 28th, last couple of days of February, moving into March. The year always moves so quickly, but we've got a couple of big opportunities for more education, John, above and beyond the Get Ready for the Future show next week.
That's right. And we really emphasize education as part of the GenWealth process that we have for you to help you find, protect, and share true financial independence. And it really starts with the workshop. I think that's where we actually began this whole education process way back when, was doing these workshops. And we have one coming up on March 5th. That is a Tuesday, 6:30 at the Chenal Events Center in West Little Rock. It is our Social Security workshop with a special guest. Matt Emanuel is going to be joining us. Matt does a wonderful presentation of Social Security things, and clearly every time we've done this, Scott, people have walked away with way more knowledge about how they need to deal with Social Security as they approach retirement. So that's coming up on March 5th. And then on March 12th at 6:30, over in Hot Springs at the Chittum Events Center, that is in Hot Springs. There's an estate planning workshop that we're planning with our estate planner, Chris Rippey. Chris is an attorney in Conway. We work very closely with Chris in dealing with estate planning. He wanted to help us do an estate planning workshop because there's a lot of detail in terms of estate planning. So that's going to be going on March 12th at 6:30 over in Hot Springs. So if you're listening in Hot Springs, be sure to go to getreadyforthefuture.com/academy and register for those workshops. That's getreadyforthefuture.com/academy. You've got two choices.
And they're free. Both of them free to attend.
Yep.
We're going to feed you. We're going to have a presentation. There's going to be an opportunity for more Q&A with the presenters. So bring your questions to it. And again, we're not there to sell you anything. It is all about your education. And proof, once again, just by the topics that you talk about, John, Social Security and estate planning, that retirement is more than just investments. And I'm going to build just a little bit before we dive into the questions in our program on that Social Security topic. You know, we do a piece called The Fastest 4 Minutes in Finance every week. And this week, we're picking up on that Social Security theme. I found a survey released by Mass Mutual that was conducted in January that asked 13 true or false questions of 1,500 Americans ages 55 to 65. And 41, and they're about Social Security, 41% of the respondents got an F. Failed on, and these were, and wow. I looked at the questions, John. They're basic Social Security questions. They're things we're going to talk about in this workshop, but the average American in that survey anyway could not pass a 13-question true or false statement.
Just true or false.
Yeah,
they
just
didn't
true
have
or
to have deep knowledge. They just had to go true or false. So it is incredibly critical. You think, oh, well, I'll just claim Social Security when I get to it. It's really not that simple. And if you don't really follow through with what you're trying to do with Social Security and understand all the nuances and structure your plan around Social Security, then you're really going to miss out. We believe Social Security really is the foundation of your overall financial plan. It is a great program if you understand and know how to use it. So definitely want to take part in that Social Security workshop coming up on March 5th, at 6:30 at the Chenal Events Center. And then don't forget the next week on March 12th at the Chittum Events Center in Hot Springs at 6:30, estate planning with Chris Rippey.
Yep. GetReadyForTheFuture.com/academy to register for either or both of those upcoming workshops. All right, time to dive into our questions on the Get Ready for the Future show today. First up, it's Rachel in Bentonville. And Rachel writes, I make $115,000. My company stopped 401k match and is doing an automatic 5% into a cash balance plan, instead pinned to 10-year Treasury. Should I invest less in bonds in the accounts I do control? Well, we don't know Rachel's age, and I think that's very important here too, but I do think from a diversification standpoint alone, Johnny, I think this is generally we would say yes, because if you are out of the control of 5%, that 5% match, and it's going into something like a bond or tied to the Treasury, you're going to want at least a portion of the funds that you're contributing into more growth-oriented vehicles.
Yeah, you want to approach this from a total picture standpoint, not just on the account, because you can't do anything with that cash balance pension plan to affect what your company has decided to invest in. Now, I'm not going to go down that road and argue about what the company's decided to invest in. It is what it is. But you control your 401k plan. You control any other accounts that you have, like an IRA account or something of that nature. And we believe that you need to think about that as a total picture. And what does that mean? Well, how much money is going into that cash balance pension plan? How much do you have in it? What percentage of your overall portfolio does that make up? And again, depending on your age, as Scott alluded to, you could be very, very heavy in equities on the other side of that and be just fine. As a matter of fact, if you're young and there's a lot of money going into that cash balance pension plan, then you could be kind of dragging behind in terms of the ability to keep up with inflation. But we're not going to worry about what you can't control. What we are going to worry about is what you can control. And what you can control is the investments and the equity mix that you have in the 401k plan. The one thing that I would say, Scott, that is probably not a good idea for them to do is to just do what a lot of people do, and that is default to this target date fund thing, because you're going to have more bonds in the target date fund, so you're going to be overweight in bonds. You want to really think about how much you want to have in equities and probably be more aggressive on the 401k side than you normally would be, because you've got that bond component in the cash balance plan.
Yeah, we've talked about that target date fund before. In fact, I think last week we talked about that. And if you're not familiar with that, actually most people probably are, but if you find those in your 401k, it's going to start with the year. And that year is generally meant to be the year you're intending to retire. So if you pick a year very far into the future, it is going to be more growth-oriented. But as you get closer to that retirement year, it is going to be on a glide path to more conservative. And the way they define more conservative is more bond exposure. So that wouldn't be probably a good route to go either. And then the other component of this, too, is the cash balance part that your employer is putting in there is going to be stable, but it's not going to move very much. And when you're putting your funds in, you probably want that movement. And I'm talking about in both directions. We've talked about the concept of dollar cost averaging before on this show. And the more aggressive or the more volatile an investment is, can actually work in your favor, John, when you are frequently contributing and buying more shares.
It can, and you're not going to get that effect, as you mentioned, over here in the cash balance plan, because it is fairly stable. Bond prices do fluctuate to some degree, but the yield on that cash balance plan is currently around 4%. 4.3% is where the 10-year Treasury rate was right before we came on the air. I checked on that. And so, you're not going to get a lot of growth there. You're also not going to be able to really outpace inflation in that. So that makes the emphasis on your other portfolios, 401k, IRAs, things of that nature. You want to probably even think about contributing to things like a traditional IRA, even though you may not be able to deduct it, or maybe a Roth IRA to get more equity exposure in your portfolio in addition to what you may be doing in your 401k.
Yeah, I think that's a great point you make about not outpacing inflation, because we're in this odd time right now in the economy where you actually can. The inflation is about 3%, and as you mentioned, the Treasury yields are 4%, but that is not going to last.
Right.
It never has for very long. It's upside down. The yield curve is inverted, and that's not the way history tells us things are going to go for very long. And I think the other part, too, that we'd point out here for Rachel, we didn't know, she did not tell us, and I think this is a key component to her her planning for retirement is we don't know her contribution rate. How much are you putting back? Because we've said this on the program too before, because she's focused on investments, and that's important. Your rate of return is important, but way less important than the rate of return is what are you putting in?
Yeah. And there's a lot of pieces to this, Scott. You know, there's a lot of components here. And this is why I think it would behoove Rachel to sit down with a financial advisor and take a look at that allocation. Look at all of the factors that are coming into play here, because you can do some things with this with limited knowledge. And it's okay. It's not going to blow up anything, but you might not be getting the maximum impact for your retirement savings if you don't bring along someone that has some expertise in this area and help to guide you.
If you've got questions for the Get Ready for the Future show, you can call or text them to us at 501-381-5228. You can call and leave a voicemail, or you can write it out in text and send it to that number. You can also send us an email to show@getreadyforthefuture.com. Get a question in. Whatever it is about money, we're here to answer it and give you some good education along the way. Next up on the program, it's Wendy, and she writes via email. I'm 54 and recently divorced. $630K in retirement, planning to retire at 60, and $350K sitting in, and she writes HYSA, and we put in parentheses, that's a high-yield savings account. I want a house, but I have cheap rent in a high cost of living area. What should I be doing with my money? Should I invest it? Great question there, Wendy. Thanks for your email. So Wendy is now single, and she has a lot of money sitting on the sidelines in the high-yield savings account, which is probably, again, back to the interest rate discussion, doing okay right now. But she really wants to determine whether she wants to buy a house or keep renting, and she says it's cheap rent. This is, again, a key component to an overall financial plan, because while she has gotten off to a great start, she's got a pretty good nest egg there.
Yes.
In retirement, that's a substantial amount on the sidelines that could add to her retirement outlook. So I mean, I'm tempted to say right off the bat, it's probably you're going to want to split it, right? You're not going to want to use all 350 for a house, because you will need to evaluate where you are in your retirement income situation first.
Yeah, and I think that a good piece of advice here would be for Wendy to just consider where you are in life at age 54, whether a house is really something that you want to take on. Now, let's stop for a minute. Wendy has $350,000 in cash, so she could go pay cash for a house. But paying cash for a house is not the end of it. You've got maintenance, you've got upkeep, you've got utilities, you've got all of these things that you may or may not have in your current situation. She says she has cheap rent, so we're going to think that she's really doing well over there. And I would just caution her to think twice about the home ownership, the cost of home ownership. Insurance, taxes, those types of things do have an impact. Not saying you shouldn't do it. I think you probably should think about it. But again, you want to think about what's in your best interest. And the one thing I would say about a house, Scott, is I would not be interested in taking part of that money as a down payment on a house and then carrying a long-term mortgage into retirement, because I don't really think that's necessarily in a single person's best interest to do that. And I think you have to think about what's the utilization of the house. Are you going to have people over? Do you need a big house, or are you okay in the living conditions that you're in right now? So all that being said, I think that she seems to be in a pretty good spot as far as retirement is concerned. Although it's just a little more than a guess, because we really don't know what your needs are as far as income is concerned for retirement. Scott, I always say there's no do-overs on retirement. And so I think the first thing that she should do is to sit down and take stock of where she is on this retirement journey, and then let that guide her in terms of what to do with that $300 and some odd thousand that's in the high yield savings account.
Yeah, this is a present question, a current question. She's wanting to make a decision in the here and now, but she understands that it could impact her future. And she does tell us that she's planning to retire at 60. So we know we only have about 6 years until you're going to have to replace your paycheck. And we need to know what your plans are to do that. Obviously, at 60, you're not going to be able to claim Social Security yet. The earliest you can take a Social Security benefit is 62. So we're assuming here that you're going to start taking income from your assets. So the first thing we need to do is to begin with the end in mind, and that is at age 60, with some future growth on your $630,000, what kind of monthly income is that capable of producing? And then layer in Social Security at the proper time to determine a total monthly income. And is that going to be sufficient? And is it going to be what you want in retirement? And if it's not, then that's when we can determine how much of that $350,000 needs to be attributed to retirement. But I would say this, John, and we can close with this part of it. $350,000 in a high-yield savings account's too much.
Yeah, it is.
We need to do something else with it.
It's a big amount. It's definitely a big amount, and we need to redirect it somewhere other than just cash savings because she likely does not need that much money. One other item I want to speak on here as far as Wendy is concerned, she's told us that she's divorced. And so one of the other considerations back to Social Security and this workshop that we're talking about, I want Wendy to sit down and analyze whether or not she can draw and utilize a divorced spouse benefit from Social Security. If you were in a marriage for 10 years or more, then you are actually eligible to draw against your ex-spouse's Social Security record. Now, that sounds awfully complex. It's really not. The ex-spouse doesn't have to be involved. They don't even have to know that you're drawing off of it. You have that ability to do that directly from Social Security. That is a road that oftentimes is not traveled at all simply because people don't understand it. And it's one of the things that Matt Emanuel will be talking about on March 5th at that Social Security workshop that we mentioned at the top of the show.
That was one of those true or false questions, by the way, on that survey that I mentioned from Mass Mutual, and only about 60% of respondents got that right. So it is commonly misunderstood,
yes.
The options you have as a divorced spouse. Just one of the things we'll be covering with Matt Emanuel at the Social Security workshop. Again, the way you sign up for that, it's coming up March 5th at 6:30 at the Chenal Event Center in Little Rock. That's just right across the street from right across Chenal Avenue from the promenade.
Yeah. If you know where U.S. Pizza is up on the hill, it's right behind that.
So real convenient to our Central Arkansas folks. You can just sign up by going to getreadyforthefuture.com/academy. All right, next up on the show, it's Trey from Little Rock. And Trey writes, married, 45 years of age, with just paid off house, no debt, and $500,000 in traditional retirement. Self-employed, $80K a year. Well, they get right to it. There's no color in these questions. It's like right to it. Here are the facts. Question: should we roll over $20,000 a year into a Roth for the next 20 years? Very specific. Trey, thanks very much. He tells us he's 45. He's married, just paid off the house, no debt. He's got $500,000 in traditional retirement and is wanting to know about rolling over to a Roth. Well, first let's get our terminology right just so we don't confuse anybody. You don't roll over from traditional pre-tax dollars in your retirement account to a Roth. So the terminology is you would convert it. And I think that's what he's trying to ask us here.
Yeah, it's semantical, but it is important if you're talking about it to someone that it is a conversion. So here's the bottom line. If you can absorb the tax impact of an additional $20K a year in income without any withholdings from that $20K, then a conversion might be an interesting idea. And I say that you need to be able to absorb that without any withholdings because it defeats the purpose to convert it and then take money out of that conversion to pay the taxes that are due. You get dinged on that by the government. So you have to have the ability to either absorb that in your individual tax return or have money on the sideline to pay that extra tax that you will eventually owe on the conversion. Now, by converting to a Roth, Scott, what Trey would be able to be doing is to create tax-free income in retirement. You should have a good amount of time for that Roth to grow as you do these conversions. And that's the other factor here is that if you have a long runway before you're going to use this money, you have time for tax-free additional dollars to grow, not just your principal, but the additional dollars as well. And so when you think about it, this is probably not a bad plan for Trey to be able to go down this road. And there are some other benefits to thinking about this far ahead of time.
Yeah, and I think, we talk about it all the time. The Roth IRA is the most underutilized but most flexible retirement account available. And there's a lot of reasons that it's underutilized. And I think part of that is the best time you can take advantage of it is when you're younger. And when you're younger, you're not thinking about retirement. And we would consider Trey still pretty young here, even at 45, because your time horizon to retirement is still a pretty good ways out. He doesn't tell us, I don't think, when he wants to retire, but we're saying 15, 20 years still of tax deferred growth and tax-free withdrawals in retirement always makes sense to us. The challenge for people to continue to do that all the way through their work life is that generally they earn more money in their later years, and there are limits to how much you can earn in income from your employer and still be eligible to contribute to the Roth. So you have to get creative, and there are ways to do that. Converting is one of them, and I do think at 45 years old and converting that $20,000 a year is a great idea. The key is, as you mentioned, John, he's got to have that money on the sidelines to pay the tax that would be due in the year he does it. And then that's another reason people don't do it later, because they're in the higher earning years, right? And their tax bracket is higher. We talk about it when folks are walking up to retirement and actually going into retirement. In that first year of retirement might be a good time to look at it too, because typically your earned income or your income is going to go down significantly. People don't typically live on as much in retirement as they do when they're working. So that's a great opportunity to look at it too. And there's other reasons, I think, to have more money in the Roth when you get to retirement. There's all kinds of, when we talk about flexibility, not only is it tax-free withdrawals, but it's also not counted against you when determining the taxation on your Social Security.
Yeah, there is a whole complexity to calculating taxes on Social Security and what income counts toward that. And so a Roth IRA actually helps you. I'm not going to bore you with all the details of it, but a Roth IRA actually helps you to do that. Scott, I want to go a little bit different direction too in talking to Trey. Trey said he's self-employed, and we might suggest that Trey explore all of the options of the retirement plans that are available to businesses. That would infer that his question infers actually that he's contributing simply to a traditional IRA, because he said something about he has $500,000 in traditional retirement. So I'm going to assume that's a traditional IRA that he has. He can greatly increase the amount of money that he can put away toward retirement by looking at things like a simple or an SEP or even a defined benefit plan if he has enough income to cover that. There's a lot of room there, so you can boost your overall retirement savings by looking at some of those as an additional strategy for retirement.
Yeah, and taxes are going to be a huge consideration in retirement. You need to do some tax planning, so the more Roth IRA dollars you have, that even becomes a great opportunity to replace a vehicle, make lump sum withdrawals without having to worry about that counting against you from a tax perspective. And I do want to kind of hit one thing that you said there about, we talked about Social Security being taxed. I think about a call I actually took today from a client, and we were going back over some of his tax withholdings, because when we send retirement income from the investments for our clients, we are able to, LPL withholds and sends a certain percentage set by the client and us to the IRS for taxation. Works just like it does in your work life and your payroll taxes. But he ended up owing a little bit this year, and he discovered the reason that was, when talking to his CPA, is he hadn't withheld anything from Social Security.
Yep.
And he unbeknownst to him, that he was going to need to withhold anything from Social Security. That is a common thing that I think surprises a lot of people, that Social Security on the federal level is taxable, at least a portion of the benefit.
Yes, Arkansas has excluded Social Security from the state income tax, but it is taxed at the federal level. It could be taxed as much as 50% of your Social Security could be taxed in a low-income situation. Most people have 85% of their Social Security subject to tax. Now, understand, that's not the tax rate on Social Security.
Right.
That's the percentage of your Social Security income that is subject to tax, and your tax would be your normal tax rate wherever you are based on your income.
Yeah, so go ahead.
I was just going to say that I think that's even more of a reason for folks to attend that Social Security workshop, because there's great nuggets that you can take from this and avoid maybe a surprise.
Yeah, and that goes back to your point. That's why a Roth can help you, because if your Social Security is taxed, the amount of your Social Security benefit is taxed based on your income The Roth does not count as income because it is not taxable. So
that's right.
Yeah. So to Trey's point, to answer the question, yeah, I think as long as you're prepared to do it, and that means having the cash on the sidelines to pay the taxes, it's generally a great idea to convert some traditional or pre-tax dollars into Roth when you have a considerable time horizon before retirement.
Scott, we're talking about a lot of complexity on a lot of things here today. I do need to do just a somewhat self-serving, but serving to our listeners as well, plug for us here at GenWealth, because we work through this stuff all the time. We are retirement experts at GenWealth. There is a retirement income certified professional in a lot of our locations, and so all you have to do is reach out to us, and we've got a lot of this. This is like old hat. Every day we do this type of thing. So don't get blown away by some of the complexity that we're talking about here. Rely on someone who knows a little bit more about the situation to help you get through this situation, and you're likely to have a much better outcome. So you can reach out to us at 501-653-7355 or email us at info@getreadyforthefuture.com.
Yeah, and here's the deal. It's a lot. It's complex. It's a lot to stay on top of generally. But then you add into the mix that it's changing all the time.
All the time.
So it's even harder to stay on top of it when they're changing the laws and the rules and the taxes, and everything changes all the time. And that for certain has happened over the last few years in this country. Trey is our question of the week. I think that's a great question and certainly applies to a lot of people in his same situation. We're going to give you a free Get Ready for the Future show tumbler. Trey, for being the question of the week, we just need you to email us, show@getreadyforthefuture.com, to claim it. And if you'd like to get a tumbler by sending in the question of the week, here's how to send the question. You can call or text them to us at 501-381-5228 or send an email, show@getreadyforthefuture.com. Having some good questions this week on the show, and our final one of the day is from Rex in Maumelle. My wife is a full-time mom, and I'm lucky enough to have a good enough job to support that. I have a life insurance policy, but does she need one? Great question, Rex, and it is certainly easy to think that his wife does not because she has no income currently, and that makes sense in your mind because generally life insurance is meant to be there as an income replacement or a debt payoff if someone doesn't come home. But I don't think that really serves him very well if that's the end of the way he thinks about that.
No, that's where logic can fail you in a situation like this. And if you, this is the easy way to think about this, Scott. If you think about, for Rex, if you sit down with your wife and you go, okay, tell me all the stuff that you do that has to go on in our household, and that if you were gone, I'd have to hire somebody to do that stuff. And there's probably a long list. You know, that's this, when people often refer to their spouse as unemployed, they get beat up because they go, no, I just work at the house.
Right.
And there's plenty of stuff that needs to be done. And there's probably a long list. And obviously, I don't know anything about Rex and his spouse's situation, but I would grant you that there is probably, pardon me, a lot of money that would have to be spent by Rex if she didn't come home one day. Things like childcare, things like taking care of the house and hiring a maid to come in and clean and cook and all the things that you don't do now or don't want to do in the future. That's where life insurance can come into play. Now, here's what I want to say about this, because people tend to get ick on them, and that's an official term, ick. Yeah, they tend to get ick on them when we start talking about life insurance because there is a lot of ick out there. But here's what you need to know. In this case, it's very simple. Term life insurance is very inexpensive, and you qualify for it by just simply taking, whatever test the insurance company wants you to take, but you get a lot of coverage for not a lot of money, relatively speaking, against other types of insurance. Now, I will say that there's a lot of people out there that want to sell you something that's way more expensive. You don't need it. Term life insurance is something that is incredibly useful in situations like this. And term life insurance is very simple. If the insured person dies, the insurance company pays. If they live, you pay the premium. It's kind of like car insurance. And if you don't have a car anymore, you don't worry about paying the premium on your car insurance. And if you don't have this need anymore after the kids are grown and gone from home and all of that type of thing, then you don't really need the insurance. You can get rid of it. Well, I wasted all that money, John. I really, need to. Well, look, you just need the coverage because you don't think about your homeowner's insurance, or you don't think about your car insurance as being a waste of money if you don't have a claim. You think about it paying for the coverage that you have during that time. So clearly, I think that Rex has something that he's onto here, and I think that term life insurance would actually fill that bill, Scott.
Yeah, and I would also point back to Rex, too. He said he has life insurance. How does he know if it's enough, and where does it exist? Because I think we can talk a little bit about the role of group policies here, too, because Rex talks about being employed. Typically, the cheapest route to get some life insurance is going to be through your employer, because you usually don't have to qualify for it because the group is covered. And you usually can get some of it without paying for it. Typically, you're maybe getting a unit of annual salary, maybe 1.5. But the thing about that is, even if you buy some more, it is not likely to be portable. So if you change jobs, you no longer have that policy. So doing a full insurance review as part of your overall financial plan makes sense for Rex and his wife to determine how much coverage that he needs, and then B, if he doesn't have it all available through his employer, or potentially even if he does, because that policy wouldn't be, or that coverage would not be portable, you may need to look at some more term life. And again, to John's point, it is very inexpensive if you're reasonably healthy. And the cash value life insurance policy, the whole life, maybe has its place in certain instances, but it's not this one. We want to pay as little amount for insurance as we can to get the biggest death benefit we can, and that is through term insurance, term life insurance. And I do think, again, it highlights for me every time we have the life insurance discussion on this show, John, the need for it all to be done in a holistic plan. Because when you talk about, well, how much life insurance do I need? Well, when we talk about we're bridging the gap in your work life until you are retired, and at that time you should be self-insured with your assets. How do we ensure that happens unless we're on track with contributions, investment strategy, a retirement income plan? Then it all makes sense, right? I'm covered in case something happens and those future retirement contributions don't happen. I leave a mortgage behind to my wife and kids. And if you can see it all on paper, you realize, okay, I'm covered until that point. Then I don't need it anymore, because if something happens, we have the money to cover it.
Yeah, and I want to be sure that people don't get lured into this life insurance discussion and get led astray. Social media is wonderful and all that type of thing, and it's done a lot of good for our society. It's also done a lot of harm for our society, and it is an unfiltered channel of information. And when social media begins to talk about things like index for universal life is better than your 401k, understand that you need to run from that kind of advice. There's a lot of just flat out wrong advice out there about life insurance. In a lot of cases, term life insurance carries the weight of everything that you need as far as life insurance is concerned, with maybe some exceptions of estate planning and things of that nature, some special needs situations. But be careful of who you're listening to on this life insurance subject.
Yeah, that's a great way to finish, because you do hear people pitching products, and you don't hear that on the Get Ready for the Future show. We may talk generally about investments, investment strategy, but the reality is investments are unique to the individual's situation. There is not a one-size-fits-all approach. So if you hear, I would say anytime about any product, that this is good or this is bad, no product is inherently good or bad. They are all neutral, and they can be a tool in your toolkit, or they may not be a tool you need. And I'm going to be quiet now, because that was the final bell. You get a final thought.
Final thought is, look, we've covered a lot of information today on Social Security. We've covered a lot, touched on things like life insurance, which actually plays into estate planning. At GenWealth, we believe education really is the hallmark of what we want to deliver to you, because we know if you're better educated, then you're going to be a better client for us, and you're going to be in in better situation as far as your financial future is concerned. So we've got 2 opportunities for you to take advantage of education from GenWealth, and that is March 5th at 6:30 at the Chenal Event Center, Social Security workshop sponsored by GenWealth, featuring Matt Emanuel, who is a great presenter on the information of Social Security, and you'll come away with a great amount of knowledge from Matt's presentation. And then on March 12th at the Chittum Event Center in Hot Springs, we're going to have Chris Rippey come and do an estate planning workshop. So if you're going to leave anything to your heirs and what have you, you probably have a need for an estate plan. You want to take advantage of that March 12th at 6:30 at the Chittum Event Center. Also, you can register at getreadyforthefuture.com/academy to register for either of those workshops.
If you're ready to make an appointment with an advisor here at GenWealth, you can call 866-653-PLAN. And that's all the time we have for this week's Get Ready for the Future show. Great questions again this week, and if you've got one, get it to us. Call or text it to 501-381-5228 or send us an email, show@getreadyforthefuture.com.
The GenWealth Financial Team is available to you 24/7 at info@getreadyforthefuture.com or call our offices at 866-653-PLAN. That's 866-653-7526. You should personally consult a financial advisor before making any investment, and no strategy can assure success. Securities offered through LPL Financial. Member FINRA SIPC. Investment advice offered through Independent Advisor Alliance. Independent Advisor Alliance and GenWealth Financial Advisors are separate entities from LPL Financial.